Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm thinking about episodes and I'm thinking state of the world, state of the listeners, state of myself, And it dawned on me that, there's been a meme going around for years about things that happen to you when you take in too much media of various types, right? They'll say, why aren't you suffering from this disease? And they'll say, because we don't have televisions. Why aren't you suffering from this? Because I don't have a television. There's a whole bunch of truth to that, isn't there? A few years back, we got a phrase introduced to us called cognitive dissonance. And it was all about someone who couldn't accept the truth. Now, it'd been around for a really long time. It's also known as the Emperor has no clothes on story. Today, it's probably more of a double-edged sword, which we call gaslighting, which is the process of being told something that you want to believe is true. And instead of being in denial about the information, you take it in. But then a couple days later, you hear the exact opposite that sounds just as legit as the first position that they took. So left is correct, no, right is correct. 1 + 1 = 2. 2 + 2 = 7. And so we start developing in this time frame what I'm going to coin in this show is Media PTSD. There is two ways to look at this, and your fast solution is to stop taking it in. That's honestly the way to cure yourself. Then you look at the world going to hell in a handbasket in many different sectors of logic and reality, and you're like, I can't stop taking in information. I care too much. I want to be on the front lines, or I want to at least know what's coming to my front door. And you wouldn't be wrong. And you probably are coming up with a decent opinion about how to take in information. Well, then it's one of these situations where if this was an analogy for war, then you're talking about going from Revolutionary War type strategies where before the Minutemen started changing things up, where these guys, and still, if you watch the movie Patriot, you'll find out that they still stood in lines for a very, very long time. You stood in lines with your muskets or your weapons, your black powder rifles, and you loaded up. And you look at each other, and then you fire on each other. And then one guy, the first row takes a kneel, if you're still alive, then on and on down the line until everybody's dead. An honorable way to decide whether or not you won the war or not, which is just absolutely ridiculous. It just means that the biggest weapon wins. Or the people with the biggest army win, instead of being clever. So that's the old school way of fighting. And we look at those movies like Patriot and we're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe anyone thought this was a good idea. If you're really fighting for something that matters, there's honor among fighting without being ridiculous and systematically destroying each other, right? Well, now it's a sort of a war where you're being fought from every single conceivable angle that can be fought. Isn't that right? Your education sucks. Your medicine sucks. Your food sucks. There's ambient stuff going around in the atmosphere that, again, if you knew how much you're being bombarded by invisible waves of energy, you would go psychotic. You would be, oh my God, how do I stop this? You would Faraday cage every room in your house. You wouldn't hold a cell phone anywhere near your body. Simply because that gets you more addicted to their mediums, right? We, a few years back, we realized that these devices were giving us short attention spans. Now we have nano-sized attention spans. And what's really fascinating about it is that friends of mine who are super addicted to collecting all the information they possibly can look like the Portlandia skit where Fred Armisen, he must have done this almost 10 years ago, where he's sitting at his kitchen table and he has his cell phone, his iPad, his laptop, and like 10 other devices. And he's getting a message and he's just rotating over the kitchen table, just in this infinite loop of getting information. I have a friend that's paced maybe slightly slower than that in terms of seconds, but he lives exactly like that. iPad, iPhone, television. The television goes between YouTube and the thing that rhymes with crumble. What else? Prime. Can't do Netflix much because they're just dying on the vine, unfortunately. Disney Plus. It just goes in this infinite loop. And I mean 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, if he has a short shift. You can't be in the room without the TV playing. Unbelievable. And he's awake, not woke. So I want to parse this a little bit because it's very, very fascinating, I think, for every single one of us. If you're a person that suffers from addiction, gambling, alcohol, drugs, something else, sex, then you can look at the addiction of devices and you completely get it because you've been there before. You know what the chemical triggers feel like, the dependency to get something. Now, again, there's two types of alcoholics. There's chemical dependency alcoholics that are looking for the next drink on a chemical level, and then there's the individual that's suffering from some psychiatric issue, and they're drinking to erase the feeling, but they don't necessarily think about a next drink the next day until the anxiety goes up, and then they drink again. But it's only triggered by psychological events. Could be PTSD. But for a bunch of us that have never been addicted to much, I mean, to the point where you simply can't live without it sort of thing, right? You now have a taste of it. You have a taste of it. I will say that a cell phone is probably the very first time where I've seen myself looking for the red dot. Red dots have kind of gone away, but they're inside the apps. I have to turn off notifications for most of the apps on my telephone because I can't have a constant, hey, Instagram, Facebook, blah, blah, blah. What is it? Telegram, Signal, blah, blah, blah. I only let text messages go through on a notification on my phone because that's usually dealing with business or something like that. But I have felt it. I have felt that addiction. And so here we are. We've been strung out on these Pavlovian loops. And we never had them in our life before. And now they're there. So, media PTSD, what does that mean? Well, true PTSD is obviously the traumatic event that is lost in time. You're suffering the mental reaction to perhaps a physical and mental moment in your life that messed with you. And you can't find it anymore, or it's so traumatic your mind buried it. If you were abused, typically your mind buries it and you have to dig it out and deal with it, and then you can say goodbye to it. If you're in a military operation, it could be that you were knocked unconscious and that event was so horrific that it's all the anxiety of the event is there, but you don't remember the event. So how does media cause that? I don't think it's a tremendous stretch to say that when the very fabric of what you have always grown up to believe is true turns out to be false, that's a massive PTSD moment. It's a Trojan horse of lies that has been injected into your life, wrapped in a container of truth. And being kids, of course, we trust everything up to a point. And we find out some imaginary characters aren't real at some point. Reveals almost poetically, ironically, the archetype of life that we're about to experience permanently. But now what's interesting about it is that if we were to live in a Star Trek world, well, for the most part, people are good to people. People are telling the truth. No one has any need to steal. Everybody has what they need, and that gets rid of a lot of greed, a lot of deception, a lot of desperation to do someone harm. It's actually sort of an interesting notion that anyone from Earth from the 24th century can travel the galaxy and run into deceptive races and have any faculty to deal with it. It seems like they would need to be educated in Starfleet on how to deal with that. And then that would almost be a coveted secret weapon that they could use against the rest of humanity, who would be technically without need of knowing that knowledge, right? It's almost like the invention of a lie sort of thing for most of the people on Earth. It's never dramatized like that, but that's just sort of some metadata about the show. The reason why, and we all know this, the reason why the world's upside down is that there's too many people like this. And what's really strange about it is there's really sort of three species of individuals out there that become these scumbags. There's more than that, but there's three main ones at our level. One is that you have, for whatever reason, a rich person who is taught by their parents that they're superior to everyone else, and that if you need to, consume them to get what you want, to stay rich or get richer, just do it. Screw those people. They're just sheep or cattle, So that's one that's most mysterious to me, is that a rich person would have to do harm to other people. But it always comes with a strand of the superiority complex. You don't think Nancy Pelosi would tell you how wrong your life is? You don't think Bill Gates would tell you how wrong your life is? I mean, these two people think they've got it all figured out when you probably wouldn't want a vacation with either one of them for a split second. Then you have the kind of person in the middle. They grew up a decent life, nothing rich, nothing poor, but they watch too much TV, too much media, which, like in my last episode, I talked about us kids getting addicted to things we can never afford and probably shouldn't afford. Why should we? Plenty of things we can do with our time and our money to enrich other people's lives, including our own, through doing, good things for them. Build a business, employ people, keep the business around for a couple hundred years, and think about all the souls that will go through your company. That's more of the organic one in the middle. I'm not sure which one is more prevalent, but there's a power structure that goes with all three of these. Sort of a glass ceiling that seems to follow them around or limit them. Then you have the third group of people, which are people that were disenfranchised. They're a little bit odd. Maybe they're physically odd, mentally odd, racially in the wrong place where they're not accepted. Could be indoctrination. Could be a parent says, hey, all black people hate us, all white people hate us, all Mexicans hate us, or whatever. And they grew up in those areas. None of it is particularly true. It's just someone told them that that was the case. It could be a big brother, big sister, an aunt, an uncle, grandfather, grandmother, friend. They start buying into some indoctrination. But they're the sociopaths, the psychopaths, the people that view the rest of humanity, the majority of humanity, as the enemy. You've always been a problem for me, is what they think. I've said this before a long time ago, but, one thing is really, really strange is that, I think I had a great childhood, but it was definitely not the smooth as glass bowl of cherries childhood. But I made the best out of it, and it worked out in the end. I was very lucky to end my last 4 years of schooling, 5 years of schooling in my hometown. So that was great. Surrounded by familiar place, family members, that kind of thing. So I was very blessed at the very end. But I graduate high school, I do my thing here in California, and I go back for my first reunion, and I find out that there's people that chose not to come back. And some of them were people that I really, really thought of as, they were my very good friends, and I was thinking, why on earth wouldn't they come back? And it took a little bit more in my life to start bumping into people that were saying, oh yeah, I'd never go back to my reunion. And it's like, oh, why wouldn't you go back? Oh, it was one of the most awful phases of my life. I'm like, what? K through 12, the whole thing? Yeah, the whole thing, man. Oh, I was heavy, or I was, I looked weird or whatever, but I'll show them, or some people come back simply to gloat. Whatever. Do it. Go back and gloat. You'll get over yourself and you'll smooth out, but at least you went back. What I find amazing is that there are plenty of people, even close friends of mine, I bring up the reunion thing, and man, they just have this visceral reaction to seeing their high school friends. But they seem to be very balanced human beings today. And I'm like, you don't seem like a sociopath. What's the deal? And they have this harbored hate for their schooling, for the phase of going to school with the kids. And some of them I'll say, well, how many friends did you have at high school? 6 or 7, maybe like 12 over 5 years or whatever. Like, well, who you hating? You hating those people? You hating the whole school? You hating the teachers? The teachers don't even show up. Like, most of them are dead by the time you get to your 30th, right? So what are you hating on, Look at a Dr. Fauci, who could be otherwise referred to as Mengele. This dude has been involved in the most hideous murder sprees of the medical industry, probably of any single individual with a known name. I know there's probably way more people like him out there that are doing way more vicious things, but this guy is the dude who wants to carry it to the public. He gets off on killing people. He does. Absolutely. There's no way he would be doing what he's doing. In his mind, he's a little Iago. In his mind, he buys into maybe overpopulation issues or whatever. But there's got to be a sick pleasure to what he does. And during his, was it ATZ? It's AZT or ATZ? AZT? The AIDS drug, when he was passing it out to everybody. He was kind of in the press, but not like he is today. Now he's famous. Now the nerd got really famous. And he's loving it. He gets questioned on a Senate hearing by Paul Rand, right? And he is throwing it down like he is super duper powerful, uber nerd. You can't tell me what to do. You can't corner me in my own bullshit science. He keeps telling Paul Rand that everything that he's being accused of makes no scientific sense, but at no point did he take a break to explain it. You know me on this show. If I told you something didn't make any sense, especially something you're accusing me of doing, and I say to you those words, well, that makes no sense at all. It's scientifically impossible for you to accuse me of that. Well, the very next thing I would elaborate on is how that's scientifically impossible. And if I truly am a smart person and an intelligent person, I can make it easy for you to understand. And you can debate me on it. I welcome your debate. That's not what he does because he's actually a criminal. He's actually wrong. He's actually evil. And he's actually trying to get you killed. There's been this, there was this recent thing passed in Texas limiting abortion to 6 weeks. Because 6 weeks is usually when the heart starts to beat. And, there's been a case, Roe versus Wade here in the United States, which is all about the right to your body and that sort of thing. And then there's the Nuremberg Code, which says, you have the right to your body. You have to consent to things, right? But then there was a demonstration in Texas. I'm taking it was Austin, which I believe is their capital. And it was a bunch of women out front protesting this thing. And I'm not making an observation on what your beliefs are with that whole thing. We could debate that forever and never agree. But all the women standing out front were the line from George Carlin's opening line of one of his bits, I think from the late 80s or early 90s, where he walked on stage and he said, have you ever noticed that the people against abortion are the exact kind of people you'd never want to fuck in the first place? That's his joke, not mine. But I'm telling you, this little, 24 women standing in front of this Capitol, running around against this latest law, I guess. I don't know what it is, but bill that was signed into law, are exactly those people. Unbelievable. And so we're sitting in a lounge with a bunch of guys, and we're all watching this, and we're going, geez, could you find one person in that video that you could even visually be attracted to? And everyone's like, no. Sociopaths. The disenfranchised, either through abuse or through self-abuse, right? I think one of the women in this video must have been pushing about 350 pounds. Well, nobody forced the food into her mouth. She did it to herself. She could have a moment in her past which made her a comfort eater to get rid of the anxiety of something that happened in her past. It happens to friends of ours, families members of ours, right? They retreat into food. Okay. So when it comes time to go out and march and be important and be in control, well, that's why they're there. BLM came to Huntington Beach. I think I counted, again, without exaggeration, out of probably a couple hundred people that were on their side showing up, 5 black people. Seems a little odd. That it's disproportionate. We have all of our native black people here, and they're standing out front going, what are you doing? What are you telling me? You're in the wrong town, dude. We get along. We don't get roughed up any more than anybody else. We're getting disinfoed like crazy, aren't we? Agencies that say they care about you are giving you flip-flop directives. Well, you should do this. No, you shouldn't do that. If you do this, this will be resolved. Oh, but they keep just ratcheting it up and ratcheting up. Again, people are flooding into the United States that are positive for this thing, supposedly, without a test that actually accurately tests for it. And that's okay. I will say that the music at Lollapalooza is so bad, it was probably killing the virus in everybody who was in the crowd if they were positive. So I understand that being legalized. But right after that, 2 weeks later, they have a motorcycle event, and all of a sudden, those people are all evil. Flip-flop, double standard, double speak, cognitive dissonance, and gaslighting. They understand this is happening. And they understand that you peeling yourself off your phone is damn near impossible at this point. It is almost as if it's a sci-fi movie, and as soon as you touch your phone, it's like the Borg. Those little wires come out and attach to your skin, and then they put the nanosystems in you, and you can see it crawling up your veins inside your head as you start to get turned into some automaton for the deep state. You'll watch, 10 hours of documentaries from the most celebrated scientists in the world who invented many of the tests and cures and even the technology that's being put in the drink, warning you with the absolute specific details about the science of why it's actually bad for you. Well, then you just turn on the normal suggested feed in your favorite video channel on the internet, and they're telling you the exact opposite. And they're not super scientists. They're women that serve pancakes before injecting you with something. We give way too much credence and way too much peripheral assumption knowledge around an individual simply because they pass the minimum amount of knowledge to get the description that they've been given. For instance, are there bad attorneys and good attorneys? Well, how's that possible? Aren't they all knowing? They pass the bar wherever they exist. How could that be? How could there be a good attorney and a bad attorney? Well, because they are. They passed the bar, but that's all they did. Some of them never become trial attorneys. Some of them only become trial attorneys. Some of them simply got in to get the paycheck, get the little Esquire on their business card. Then they forget most of what they learned. And so you lean on them to help you out. They pretend to have all that knowledge. You're assuming they have all that knowledge, but they don't. They're not that expert at it. And without trying what you've learned, how much could you possibly know? Doctors work on dead cadavers before they become doctors on living beings, and they apprentice great surgeons if that's where they're going. Some of them become the most incredible doctors on planet Earth. They save our family members and friends' lives in situations that you couldn't conceive how that's even possible. They rebuild faces and hearts and arms and legs and all that stuff, and it's amazing. They're truly to be celebrated every day that you exist. And then there's others that would write you a prescription that would kill you in a second because they're not paying attention. Put you in some exploratory surgery that will give you permanent damage for the rest of your life because they want your paycheck. The more you become aware of this dynamic, it's hard to stay alive. I mean, it's hard to rely on other people, I should say, right? It's hard to stay alive every single day and realize that The only thing that you can know is what we used to rely on, say 50 years ago. Your hemisphere of life. Let's do a little test here. Depending on how old you are, I think you'll still be able to imagine this, and I'll just give you my example here. And I may have done this recently because I've been explaining it to people, so I don't think I put this in our episode recently, but I want to make sure I get it out there. And even if I repeat myself, it's good for you to hear this again. Because it is the dynamic of where we are today. So let's just take my grandparents. I'm going to make up a scenario here, but they live in a little town with 10,000 people. They're born, one of them's born in the town, the other one born 8 miles away, marries her. They move into the same town eventually that she's from, buy a nice little house. So they wake up in the morning and they have, my grandfather goes to work selling cars at his dealership eventually after he stopped farming. Grandmother stays home, takes care of the 5 kids. Actually, in 1950, she only had 1 kid at the time. But now imagine how much data they would have taken in and how much imagery they would have seen in a full, say, 16 hours of consciousness. Let's say they watched a little bit of TV, although it was pretty brand new back in those days. Let's say listen to a little bit of radio. So the only visions they're seeing are in their head. Let's say my grandfather buys a newspaper. It's probably a local newspaper, not one that's LA Times or New York Times. They don't care. But they walk around this little town and they see what they see. They see the individuals, they see businesses, they see people, real people, not fake people online. Maybe on an extreme day, they go see a movie. Maybe. A little bit more vision inserted in their mind, a little more imagery started in their mind. Still, it's fictional. And then they go to bed. And let's just say we put a number on how many individual concepts and images that they saw in 1950. Let's say we give them 50 images, 50 unique images that they saw. That's probably 2 to 3 times more than they actually ingested throughout that day. What did they see? Just basic life. What we're actually put on this planet to probably experience. Now, what do you experience, whoever you are, in 2021 from the moment you get up in the morning, you live the whole day, and you go to bed? How many websites, apps on your phone, TVs and locations that you have to get your food or go on an airport or do whatever? How many individual conversations do you have about this? How many emails do you receive that are unsolicited? How much junk mail do you get that's unsolicited? And then on top of that, how much of that information has been designed to divide you against another human being, to make you utterly terrified to be where you are today? I mean, if you were to believe what they said, their attempt to freak you out. And I mean freak you out on a level that's like 1917, the Spanish flu, or 1918, really. We are ingesting so much darkness on a daily basis, which is not the product of God, right? Not the product of truth, necessarily. Just darkness, darkness, darkness every day. And we're trying to sleep at night? Okay, let's also rewind and think about the thing we were talking about earlier, 1950. Now, was there corruption in government around the world? Yeah, sure. Was banking corrupt? Yeah, sure. Did that actually get into people's lives? Well, it depends. The 1929 crash definitely got a lot of people. But the boom and bust were really far apart back in the day. And today, it's supposed to be every other year, right? But their food was organic by nature. We weren't modifying much. Yeah, we had hybrided things together to make like grapefruit and that kind of thing. For the most part, still organic. It was spliced together using nature, not science, right? Meaning synthetics. The amount of broadcast electricity in the sky, well, we definitely had radio and we definitely had television. So it was a little bit. I'm not sure what the megahertz rating on that might be. And, you know, I will say that old radio stations used to blast it hard, plus television. Okay. Now think about today. What do you have? 20 billion hertz is the lowest frequency of most towers today. Soon to be 100 billion hertz on your body. It's known for creating all kinds of blood cancers, diabetes, all kinds of bad stuff. And you can't stop it if you wanted to, unless you, again, reinforce your home. You're supposed to brush your teeth with fluoride. You're supposed to heat your food in a microwave. You're supposed to sweeten your food with artificial sweeteners. You're supposed to put aluminum dust in your armpit holes called pores to keep yourself from sweating. Supposed to. Supposed to trust all these labels on outside of food. You're supposed to believe the corporations who fund the tests to tell you that everything is safe, that they're making trillions of dollars off of every 10 years. A lot of people do. So it's as if you're standing in a domain of existence, in this dimension of existence, and you're getting attacked from every conceivable metric that you could be attacked by without actually anyone declaring war on you. Now, if they declare war on you, then they shoot you and it's over. But I think it's more insidious to be attacked sort of in locations that you're unaware of, because you don't defend yourself is the problem in a lot of cases. And even if you wanted to defend yourself, you can't. You don't drink your tap water, but you probably take a shower in it. No one's done any tests to see how much that sinks through your epidermis and screws you up. You're now being taught that pretty much everybody who isn't exactly like you hates you. That's what they're trying to teach you. That way you go out and you're on edge. You're uptight, looking for a fight, sort of, or at least you're looking for a defensive maneuver that may or may not need to happen. But because someone else across the street could be drinking the Kool-Aid extra hard, they could be believing that they don't like you because they're told who their enemies are and who their heroes are, when the inverse is probably the truth. Education being horrible, well, that's a real crux of the problem, ain't it? That's the only method we have to dig ourselves out of this issue, because it doesn't matter if someone waved a magic wand and everybody who's bad in the world up to a certain threshold disappears, just vanishes, where they go, only God knows. But we're all stuck here and we all mean well, but we're definitely lacking the formal education in the form of books. We definitely have seen a whole slew of absolutely awful teachers in the press lately. And what's interesting is it's almost like unanimous. If a teacher makes a video through a TikTok or some other platform, they're almost immediately fired because of what they say, which reveals to me that the overwhelming majority of these disenfranchised psychopaths, they hide in that institution. One, because it gives them that sense of power. I got power over kids, man. That's what they're looking for. Control in their life when they haven't had control, like we always say on the show. But the PTSD really starts when it comes to being gaslit. Told over and over and over, multiple concepts that are doublespeak. One thing's bad, but it's good in this location. People who are against abortion are also for right to your body. People who are for abortion think you shouldn't have the right to your body because they want you to take the drink. Isn't that weird? Tons of doublespeak, man. How do you, and that's just one tiny little layer of doublespeak. It doesn't matter if a box says it doesn't protect you, the product inside doesn't protect you against the thing that's going around. You could show that box to someone and they'll make up something that they heard from someone else. When the manufacturer of the product knows the legal liability of claiming that it can do something that it can't. Dr. Kevorkian, a.k.a. Dr. Fauci, says it can, even though he writes emails to his friends that say it doesn't do anything. Suddenly it's true for some people. People who are in medical science talk about asymptomatic transmission never, ever, ever being the case in history of medicine. All of a sudden now, it is. You know, and I told you guys that old story when I was a kid. My dad heard me say the word dissect when I came home because I was in science class. And he says, say it correctly. Say dissect. I was like, oh. He says there's two S's between the I and the next E. And so you have to make the I short. That's what happens in English language. 2 consonants make the previous vowel a short vowel. And so I went to school and I challenged my teacher on that. I said, I'm not supposed to say it this way. And so she got out, I swear to God, without question, I can still see it in my head right now. I was in 6th grade. She had 12 dictionaries on a tabletop in her room and pulled in 2 other English teachers, and they were looking up, the definition of the word, which has the enunciation in there, and they were all dissect. Not a single one allowed you to say dissect and be correct. And she's like, I know, I've seen this. I know. She had an early Mandela effect, if anything. Right? And she couldn't just simply acknowledge the education of how to sound out words, long and short. Why do those 2 things exist if you're just going to make up your own shit? Well, go get a dictionary right now. Go on your computer, go to dictionary.com and look up the word dissect. And it will tell you can call it dissect now. Why? Because the ignorant masses couldn't get it right, so we just fucking changed the rules. Okay, well, no standards here, man. If 1 + 1 = 5 for you, well then so be it. I can't wait for that to be true, because I'm going to go to my bank and I'm going to say, hey, that number in there, I'm going to add $1 and it actually equals $1 million now. And I'm pretty sure I can get the whole world to agree to that thing where $1 equals $1 million, no matter what's in there beforehand. 1 + 0 is a million. And you have to accept it, because we're all in agreement here. And then they're going to say my service fee is $10 million and we'll be back on the hole. We typically, 40 years ago, would wake up. We had some rules in our brain the society had laid down relative to your country, your community, etc. And you could follow those rules and you were okay. Now that doesn't work anymore, does it? And this is where you get into the slippery slope of your cognitive reality being an impossibility as long as you watch media or interact with another human being that does ingest a lot of media. How many times have you had someone come in the room and they're so excited to tell you something they found out online? Something they found out through watching a television show? There's usually 2 types of species of this. One, it's just literally generic information. Hey, did you know? Oh my gosh, I didn't know this. And that's a fun little conversation typically. But then you have the one that comes in and they're saying, they're debuting a new rule that they want you to follow because they heard it. They know a lot of people that don't follow it, and that gets them all aroused sexually. They want to go up to you and say, did you know you're not supposed to do this? Did you know you're not supposed to do it? Whether or not you follow the rule or not really won't affect their life at all. But that's not what they're interested in. They want the one thing they've never had in their life, which is the ability to control someone else, because in their mind, and maybe truthfully so, they have been controlled by others and they don't like it. So the absence of freedom in their life is now turned into a weapon of distributing the lack of freedom to others. But I also think mortality plays a huge role in some of these people's view of life and what they're willing to do to other people. If you wake up in your life and you're generally happy, you've had a pretty good life, no matter how tough it is today or how tough it was in the past, you've sort of come to peace with life. And you just want to have a good time until it's your time to go. You want to be productive or you want to retire, it doesn't matter. It's all good. You know you're following common law for the rest of your days. But now imagine that you absolutely hate your life and you have predominantly hated your life for the majority of your life. I have to assume what this is like, right? Now you might have a situation where you man up, and if you're going to do anybody harm, you do it to yourself and you're out of this world and you move on to the next iteration of life. That happens. But there's a whole bunch of those third group people who are thinking to themselves, well, I'm just going to get as brilliant as I possibly can, take my natural skills, and I'm going to make sure there's a bunch of people more miserable than me, so at least I can change the bell curve of self-perception. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolute, right? Man, when I heard that statement, I wasn't old enough to really process it completely. And it's amazing when you find someone with absolute power who is actually a good person. That blows my mind. That is a true angel on earth. And we've all met them. We've all met them. The power that I think that you should have is the power to control your own life. And I know that it doesn't always, present itself that way. We still have bills we have to pay typically, unless you win the lottery or inherit money or you're very successful at some point. There's still a lot more left after the bills are paid in order of controlling your psyche and feeling happy and exploring the universe as you see fit. What doesn't make sense to me in a modern first world country is this desire to control their people. Because in my camp and my experience in watching really good things happen, it's wild to be sort of out of the corporate world at this point, but having spent, tremendous amounts of time in corporations that were either the top of what they did or they were the top of what they did in the world. And here we are on projects for 2, 3, 4 years trying to get some entertainment experience out the door. And it's hard. And there isn't, you're not sure if you're going to succeed. You're not sure if anyone's going to like it. And it works out in the end. We were always blessed to create, video games that people loved. However, we may have totally participated in or just touched it, a little bit of testing, and it moved on. When you experience that several times and you see others that are trying to control people like Fauci, trying to kill the entire planet. I mean, this dude, if he had his magic wand, man, he'd wipe the whole place out, and he would be that dude in, was it the Mind Over Matter episode of Twilight Zone? That episode of Twilight Zone, which is, it's got a different name. Let me look it up. It's called The Mind and the Matter. Real simple story. This dude hated society. Hated it. Had this job he didn't like. This kid used to always spill coffee on him every morning, just something. This kid was a great kid, but he just was a clumsy fool. And he felt bad, and he got the guy a book, which must have been The Mind and the Matter. And he says, hey, people have figured out how to control the universe just by concentrating. And he's like, whatever. And he takes the book home, and he's totally disgruntled at his house. I mean, just his whole walk to work, walk home is awful. He lives in New York City. But he takes the book, and he reads it, and he figures it out. And so he tries something. He's able to stop traffic. Then he erases everyone on Earth, and then he goes to work. Just him. And he's bored to death. There's nothing to do. And so he plays around with some natural disasters. That's too dangerous. Doesn't want to do that. And he says, you know what? I know what the problem is. I just got to have a bunch of people like me. Whole New York City fills up with duplicates of him. It's one of the episodes where they really didn't have enough money to pull off this special effect. He plays a lot of characters, male and female, to populate the scenes, but then there's a lot of actors wearing masks. It's kind of funny. Some look awful. In the end, he comes to grip with the fact that it actually was just fine the way it was, and that the dynamics of life are just what life is all about. And he goes back to work the next day with everybody there, and the kid spills something on him automatically. But that day he's not angry. And he just sits down. He's like, Jesus, this is just the way the world is, man. And the kid asks him about the book. What'd you think about that book, man? And he's like, yeah, it's all hogwash, or balderdash, I think is what he says. Lying, of course, because it worked. Just as a digression, I just think that if these psychopaths were to be in a world that's all like them, if they didn't kill themselves, they put the place back just the way it was, and they calm down. It was interesting 2 years ago to go online, at least in video platforms, before all of them were moved to other platforms, and watch pretty much a clear divide between your disgruntled, self-loathing people who want to burn the world down, just like the Joker said, Heath Ledger. And then there's this other group of people that were, still trying to figure out the truth of things, trying to fix things. They want the best for the world. It was a clear divide. And one movement after another started dividing all the groups against each other. And so each group starts eating itself alive. And if you think the crimson-pilled people are mostly on the same platform, well, take a look at our flat earth conversation. People hating on each other. Unbelievable. It's like, dude, we got to stick together. Just have a differing opinion. And man, just basically say we have a bet going on. And hopefully we find the answer. Wouldn't it be nice? I did want to, I think I mentioned this once. I want to mention it again because I think I can say a little bit clearer. It's a digression on the Picard gentleman who did that balloon up to 75,000 feet. Said he saw the world as an upturned disc with upturned edges and that kind of thing. Well, private jets get up to 50,000 feet easy. Balloons that people have put together from that group have gone up, 85,000 feet? One just got up to 112,000 feet. Well, we know about lens distortion, and it's all corrected when it gets back down to Earth. And we don't see the upturned edges. We don't see what this dude saw at a lower altitude. So he might be a creation. Unless one of your family's members have a relationship with that family, of the Picard family, he might be a completely created thing to launch this thing. But my biggest point is they know the psychology of all people on planet Earth. At least the layman, which is you and I. And they know what to say to rile us up. Now, many of the algorithms have been so exhausted and so repeated that it doesn't have the effect it used to have on us. So believe me, they're toiling away trying to find more reasons, more things, more movements, more things to get in there and jab you. You know, and we're all guilty of responding to new things in probably the less refined manner. So how do we get out of this problem? We want to know the truth. We want to be aware of what's kind of going around. But how do we do it in a way that we can objectify ourselves away from the problem, get the information, vet it in a way, maybe even place it in our minds in a way that it doesn't do any permanent damage to us. And so it doesn't mess with us such that we have a terse conversation with another human being, that our day is destroyed because something bad happened. And I'm just going to give, because I gave you guys the alien analogy, which for those of you who missed it, I just basically said, pretend you're an alien watching humanity, but you're down here on Earth in a human body, and then it sort of objectifies you. But I'll tell you, you might have had this experience. I think most people over 40 have had this experience. You've had an elder in your life, an elder that kept their cool through thick and thin. And it's because their life prior to you meeting them or prior to the event occurring that's freaking you out, they saw more than that. In some metaphorical way or some on-point way, they have seen more tragedy than you've ever seen in your life. As new as the event might be. You know, back in the 70s, I might run into an old man that took Omaha Beach. That somebody from Vietnam, my karate teacher back in the day, was straight out of Vietnam, and he was definitely, he had that stare of just, wow, I'm in a much better place, but he also had that PTSD look in his mind, just still struggling to sort out what he experienced. Very intense man. But you'll have, well, put it this way, when you were a kid and you got in a car accident, let's just say a little fender bender, and you go home and you have that feeling, my dad's going to kill me, my mom's going to kill me. Well, in your mind, you actually might believe that. But, when you became a parent, your kid came home with a little fender bender, flat tire, whatever, called you, the car's run into a curb or something. And you're like, it's my turn to be the parent. Okay. I have to find out if there's any goofing around that caused the accident. And then I got to discipline against the goofiness. But it could just be a straight up accident. Could be no fault of anybody, slick road, whatever. They're a new driver. You got to cut them some slack. But we don't think about that archetype ratcheting up to today. By no means am I saying accountability is minimized in any way, shape, or form. I'm not saying laws should be skirted in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying that the shock and awe that we allow ourselves to feel can be tempered the more that we sort of play out scenarios in our mind, and then you got to put them away. You know, living near a major city, for instance, you have to contemplate major things that happen to a major city. When I was a little kid, for instance, I lived in Kansas, and Wichita, Kansas, as I mentioned a couple of times, has a tremendous amount of missile silos around that city. Omaha, Nebraska has a bunch around their city too, because they're Midwest. It's the safest place to put your counterstrike, because the mathematics are that if there's any incoming missiles, that they would hit the coastline first, then the interior, just for the sake of travel. And so you want to have your response in the center, right? All right. Well, looking at those things as a child, and obviously them trying to keep the narrative alive that we're all going to die of a nuclear holocaust of some sort, you have to think it through. You think about atom bombs going off. What's that going to be like? Where can I hide in my little hometown? Once you move to New York City, LA, San Francisco, Chicago, maybe Dallas, Texas or something, you have to contemplate, well, you might be in a high asset region of the world that if there ever was a strike from a foreign person, or now we know internal people, that might be where they play the game. And then we have natural disasters in California. Again, a hurricane doesn't surprise you. A tornado can surprise you if you're not paying attention to the weather, and there's some freak anomalies where it could actually spin out of nowhere. But overall, you kind of have some indicators if you're concerned about such a thing. But an earthquake can just happen. So there hasn't been a day that I have traveled inside Los Angeles, or probably even San Francisco, in a car or whatever, where I'm not contemplating, oh my God, I could be under this overpass right here, jam traffic, and it could start shaking. And even though virtually nobody dies, this overpass falls and squishes me to a dime. So I've told my friends this, and you'll find a lot of people do this. When you're in jam traffic in a big city, you want to be either on the shoulder or in the fast lane, and you keep that little space, enough space in front of your car so that you can break off into the shoulder and haul ass out from underneath an overpass. In case it starts shaking, you just go boom, you pull out and you can wait it out. So you probably have like a shopping cart of these scenarios of all different kinds in your life. Maybe even if you're a prepper, you've thought this through a lot more than other people. That allows you to reduce your anxiety when things start to occur. The reason why I'm bringing this up is that when you experience this totally slippery slope, double talk, double standard, gaslighting stuff that's going on like crazy now in the press, even in the conspiratorial sectors of videos and whatever tool you're using to get information, you've got a whole slew of sort of archetypes of people passing this information around. You have the opportunists who are, telling you they're connected to all these clandestine projects, and all these insiders, and they film their boots. They say they had calls with these people in open lines. And then you have the person that is I'm trying to get as many views to get my ads to run, or I'm just trying to get views because that's important to me. So they're passing out information as quickly as possible to you without vetting anything, putting the burden on you. No narratives, they just have channels. So that's one, which could be someone trying to manipulate you or someone just passing the information on. Then you have your really impressionable person who believes everything that they hear. And so, Monday they're saying one thing, and the Thursday, the one I see all the time is it's that woman from Hawaii. For me, she's a deep state wet dream because the way she presents is so obnoxious. It's high energy positivity, I guess, but it's so obnoxious that they're like, yeah, keep that channel up and keep it open because she's going to make their side look nuts, right? But she will just ingest stuff. She'll tell you on Monday that something huge is going to be happening, that a very specific thing is going to happen in the next 24, 48 hours. And then a week goes by, nothing happens. She doesn't mention it again. She doesn't follow it up. She doesn't hold herself accountable for misleading all of her listeners. And no one says anything. Just keep coming back to the trough. Because all they want to hear is something that they want to hear. They don't care. And that's cognitive dissonance within the group that's supposed to be penetrating that problem. The other one is just gullibility. Good intentions, but massive gullibility. I just watched two guys break down the movie War Games and this other dude's post that we saw for years, trying to make conclusions. And my God, there was the line that was, shall we play a game? Okay. That movie was written based on a very good friend of mine. And I mean, the screenwriter was next door, and he got in trouble for doing that stuff. And so they keep saying, oh, the movie had a computer named Joshua. No, the computer was called a Whopper, W-A-W-O-P-R. It was in the trailer of the movie. So one, they step off into this conversation, get it completely wrong. But it was every single word and concept between a wartime, hacker movie and what's going on today. Well, of course, there's going to be a tremendous amount of overlap. That movie came out, 1981? And it was all about hacking into government computers. And so now that's vogue, right? The cyber attacks and all that kind of stuff. Of course, there's going to be a lot of talk about that kind of stuff. If we ever got a wheel in space and we traveled to the moon on a shuttle, people think that Stanley Kubrick was some time traveler who made 2001 by traveling into the future, simply because that was a fictional construct based on some scientific theories that eventually became true. Don't get carried away, man. There's a few things I want to mention in this particular episode, which are kind of tangent to what we're talking about. One, people are definitely losing their patience with all of these grasshoppers. And the grasshoppers are going to get chewed up alive real soon. I mean, we're starting to see videos from men who are standing up in public and warning them. They're basically saying, this is the only warning you get. You keep messing with my kid's education, we're going to remove you physically. You keep trying to push your medical insanity on me, we're going to push back hard. And there ain't enough. Just go watch the movie Warriors, man, where Cyrus is giving his speech in the first act. That whole thing was that he said that there's 60,000 hardcore members of the gangs of New York and all the surrounding boroughs, but there ain't but 20,000 police in the whole city. Can you dig it? Right? Well, there's billions of non-military, non-police people. The last thing we want is for them to invert and cause a big problem for all of us, right? If we destroy our infrastructure, you ever seen a riot build a city? You ever seen looting build a building? No, they burn things down, they destroy things. It's just random. So if you think, revolting is a wonderful thing, well, I don't disagree if freedom is absolutely being squeezed out of existence, but shit's got to be controlled, man. Which is why I will never forgive these people who have rumored themselves to be in some organized organization that are supposed to be taking care of things. And I hope they're doing it right now. My eyes are open. My ears are open. I'm hopeful. But if they wait for it to turn into an absolute shitfest and we start suffering when it didn't have to be that way, if they just done their jobs at the right time, I'm not going to be terribly happy. Unless the end product is just phenomenal, right? But I told you guys way back in season 1, a little thing that I recognized in the 90s, even when I was a kid, which would have been my early 20s. Russia had a coup, didn't they? Early 90s. Gorbachev's kicked out. The whole country just absolutely implodes on itself. I mean, it was actually, in a lot of cases, it was phenomenal. They were going through KGB records, trying to find relatives and figuring out where people went. Their entire intelligence agency was turned inside out. The pedestrians were inside the most secretive rooms in Russia, looking up the data. Meanwhile, their IMF shill is coming in, and he's going to pretend to be the new leader. He's going to be granted the presidency of the country. And his name was Boris Yeltsin. If you go look up that event in history, the day when Boris Yeltsin climbed on the back of a car with a bullhorn, they pulled an interesting trick, which you got to be really, really aware of. If there's something you could pass around to those like you, chew this up, make up your own mind, whether or not you agree with me, add your own words and your own definition. But it goes something like this. If we don't have parameters around what a win is, then a random person can stand up and tell you that you've won without satisfying a single thing that you wanted to have changed, because you want the war to be over. Believe me, if you think it's great to have everybody out in the streets running around, that'll last about a day, and then you'll be like, oh my God, this has to stop, which is what happened to Russia. Boris Yeltsin was an IMF shill, the International Monetary Fund, which manages a lot of the conduits into the World Bank. If the IMF never existed and World Bank never existed, South America would be a much better place. The whole world would be a much better place. Boris Yeltsin gets up on that car and creates an event. It looked very organic and very Rosa Parks, right? Rosa Parks was not supposed to be the woman on the bus. Some other younger woman was supposed to be on the bus. But eventually she got pregnant out of wedlock, and they thought she was a bad candidate. So Rosa Parks knew the NAACP, as I understand, was going to be doing this to illustrate a very good point. Doesn't diminish the moment. But she got on the bus and just did it. She knew it was coming. She took the role, and it had the effect that it should have had, which is, hey, we need to stop this. So Yeltsin, not being a Rosa Parks, he gets up on this thing, creates this event, it gets televised around the world. Yay, hoorah, the coup of Russia is over, and a good man has been put in place. If you read Michael Rupert's book, Crossing the Rubicon, which is a thick-ass book, let me tell you, he explains to you how Boris signed a bunch of toxic loans with the IMF knowingly. It goes tits up within 2 years. He has to sell off all of the resources of Russia, meaning land, to the IMF to cover the loan. Same game that was played by the same group in South Africa, right? Go see, the book by the economic hitman. The Yeltsin family gets privately super compensated in the background. He runs the country until, New Year's Eve, 1999, when he takes his right-hand man, Putin, who again was forced to be in the military, forced to be in the KGB, very smart, truly one of the most James Bond guys in real life, minus probably flying helicopters and things, but I'm not sure you can't do that too. So he's really smart. He presided over building the highway between St. Petersburg and Moscow. He had to literally create the construction companies to do the work because they didn't exist. I mean, he cleaned up a huge mess. I'm not saying he's good or bad. I'm just saying. I like the way he talks to the press. I'd say that much. But that New Year's Eve, Yeltsin says, I'm giving it over to him. He's going to be your president. What you didn't know was in the background, this guy was such a criminal, Yeltsin. He made Putin sign a letter of agreement saying that the Yeltsins as a family would never be charged with anything, never be investigated, and definitely lost any chance of being incarcerated for what they did. Clean bill of health. The rest is history. There's this, rumor that something's going to take place for the good guys. Doesn't mean bad things won't happen, but these good guys are going to clean up everything. I will tell you that they need to be good people, and they need to have a very, very, very strategic plan in every single sector of everything that we have ever been concerned about on this show. Clean up the food, clean up the medicine, clean up the science, clean up the education, clean up the airwaves, clean up our water, clean up our air. Find a way to rehabilitate those that have been lied to. Have a path for folks that are disenfranchised to get back on board. to realize that their enemies are actually their heroes and their heroes are actually their enemies. Disinformation from news organizations that try to manipulate our society have to be charged for any crimes that they might have committed, taking money from foreign countries to submit articles written by foreign countries into our press as if they were written by citizens of this country. That's a felony. That's an international felony. It's a State Department felony. What I mean by international is that every country has that protection on paper, but they don't follow it. So all those things have to be, we know that human trafficking and child trafficking, all that stuff's got to be cleaned up. Everything's got to be cleaned up, and it's got to be cleaned up with all due haste. But again, you cut the money off, you cut all the problems off, and then it's just a cleanup job. Chase down the infiltrators. Might have to lock the border down for a little while, lock travel down for a little while. You got to clean this place up. And then open it back up again, and you'll be coming to a little paradise. Like I said in my last episode, I'm not sure that we're going to be the first to do it. I think that if there's a group of people at really high ranks that are going to do it, I've only heard that rumored in the United States, at least any level of detail. I know that other countries will follow. I know that that movement, if it were ever to happen, even 50% of what is rumored, a bunch of international assets will be neutralized to the point where countries will clean up simply because the industries that they have used to hurt us and to repress us and oppress us will diminish. They'll go away. The infrastructure will disappear. Imagine being able to clean up this particular part of the world. Again, it might be your country before mine. I'm really starting to think that might be the case. But see, one country cleans up. And because of the internet, everyone has access to that country, the information coming out of that country. And imagine someone handing over all the paperwork, all the video evidence, all the audio evidence, all the internet traffic evidence that some other countries' leaders, corporate leaders, military leaders, financial leaders were all corrupt to the nines. They give you all of the Polaroids all perfectly stitched together. So all you got to do is go arrest them. Well, I think that's the cascade that will occur if anyone has any balls in this country to do the job they're hired to do. Now, I won't dive too much. I got about half an inch on this thing left, but I just want to mention that I'm going to tell you a little story. I'm going to repeat a story so that you can put a perspective to this. Sorry to the OG listeners to have to listen to the story again, but there was a kid in my high school that worshiped the devil for a really short period of time. And of course, he was looking for attention. The game he started to play was that anything that happened in the town that was bad, he played like he was in that Twilight Zone with Burgess Meredith. He was saying that he claimed that everything was his doing. We had a wrestler that was one of our top wrestlers in town. He broke his arm, I think, and he said he did that. Everything bad that happened, he took responsibility for. But again, he only told a few of us, so it wasn't like if he told the whole town, they would have killed him. But he's running around shooting off his mouth. Now, he became a born-again Christian within a year. He's a good guy today. But we have the inverse formula right now. Every single time normal things happen in this world, people are on the good side, or at least their intent is good, are posting this stuff and putting narratives around these photographs, these movies, these little snippet movies that don't have any context because they're 5 seconds long. They're telling you that either great things are happening or evil things are happening. Now, the truth is, they could be right, and the truth is, they could equally be wrong. They never truly provide the full context of the information they're presenting. So you have to be careful. There's a funny little video going around, and boy, I hope the insinuation is true, trust me. But we have military accidents that happen, and they keep saying from that movement side that, oh, see, that's proof those people actually they weren't in a training exercise, they were actually doing something. It's like off the coast of San Diego or something, and you're like, really? Was there, a boat with a bunch of bankers in it? Sometimes there are accidents that happen. But there were some active duty soldiers that made a video called It's Not Happening. That's all they keep saying. They keep loading up all their gear. They keep getting in like a Humvee or something. They ride off somewhere. Keep saying, it's not happening. It's not happening. It's not happening. And so that video was promoted as the thing we keep talking about has started. And again, hopefully so. But it could equally just be, he's talking about something else. He's talking about something completely different. Again, there was no interview with the soldier. Soldier showed their face. I mean, trust me, if the bad group wanted to find out who that kid was, it'd take 2 seconds to do a face look up on that kid, look through all of his communications and find out if he's in some secret project, which would tip a hand. If he's part of the true movement side, then he would get his ass smacked down for putting a little video out and, releasing potentially some information he shouldn't. And there'd be a slight microscopic chance he's part of a disinformation thing to throw someone off. Whatever. People are coming up with a billion excuses right now to hear what they want to hear. Just remember, there's palm readers out there. And the amount of times they've been busted making stuff up and admitting after they get busted criminally for making stuff up, it's a pretty high number. It's a pretty high number. So, there's that old saying, I believe, tarot cards, just tell people what they want to hear and they'll make it happen. So there is a lot of that power of suggestion. You probably do control the universe a lot more than you think you do. So us having a very positive opinion of the world is good. But as a result of all this disinformation and this gaslighting, you trying to keep a solid positive thought that's focused, that would really change the world in a positive way, if you take in more media, it might be impossible for you to do that because you don't even know what to think in your brain. How do I fix the world? Don't know. Can't even figure out what's wrong. So I'll just tell you what I'm doing. And you can follow me if you want. I'm just trying to focus on the absolute positive avenues in my life. It seems to be working. Trying to focus on my closest friends and family and just enjoy those interactions with people. Definitely talking to God, just as much as I ever have. But I do send out my requests to bring this place into a much more godlike world. I pay attention to everything. I see everything that I can get my hands on because of my close friends. I ingest hours and hours and hours every single day, every single week, every single month, every single year. Again, I'm not terribly concerned about being inundated with more details on what is wrong with the world. I don't need any more. I don't need any videos telling me how the drink is bad, how some scientist disagrees. I already know that stuff. I already know. I know. It's it would be almost like you're a general and it's World War II. You're trying to get rid of the invasion of Europe, and you have two guys that can talk to you. One that's talking about the strategy to win, and the other one is bringing you the death logs and all the details about how each soldier died. It's not that you don't care about people suffering, because you do. But the only thing that's going to stop the dude on your left talking about this stuff is the guy on your right, who's talking about the only thing we can do is move, act, strategize. Be focused. We want to have the least amount of energy spent to have the most effect on this problem that we're having. Least amount of lives get sacrificed for the eventual product of getting rid of the war in the first place, right? Just run your life like that and you'll be amazed. But if you can, try to If you know that you can ingest this information and not get all riled up and disfocused or defocused, I should say, I'm inventing new words, defocus from your life and your happiness, then go ahead, keep going, man. But if you know that you're getting into these situations where sleeping is tough, you just feel uneasy and weird, then it's probably time to take a big step back, focus on what's good in your life, because I'm sure that all of you have wonderful little cul-de-sacs in your life that are wonderful. Just focus on those things. Like again, I went back and played a game that was released in the late 90s. I played it for hours and hours and hours until I kind of got bored of it. But that lasted me a few months when I was, tired of working and I needed a break. I was just like, oh, it's such a nostalgic old game. It's still fun to play. It was just this little bubble of positivity. I started watching Red Dwarf again, watched Are You Being Served, Faulty Towers, Are You Being Served Again? Now I'm chewing down Voyager. Just puts this nice ambient thing in the room with me while I'm working, instead of a real acidic video telling me how the world's going to end and who's going to do my door to force me to do something. It's not like I'm not paying attention to that stuff, but I need, just like everybody else, the good old times, the positive times. And for you, it's something different than what it is for me, So I made an episode, I believe it's it's retreating to creativity. I don't know if I use the word retreating, but it's about creativity. But it's just basically saying escaping the creativity. That's what it is. And it's just about this subject matter. So if you haven't seen it and this seems like an avenue that appeals to you, go see that episode again or see it for the first time. And you might find some positive avenues for yourself. So this is what I did last season, just so you guys know, as I'm putting out bonus episodes, because I'm not going to finish off the season, because the last 2 episodes I got to do some serious research for, and I'm a little busy right now. So I'm just making these episodes in the meantime. They're all part of season 6. So there'll be a lot more coming out here. Anyway, if you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, please go. It has everything you need in there. Video, audio, social media, lots of options that aren't big tech. We have a all new remastered season 1, a store with some fun shirts in it, and a couple ways to support the site and the movement and me, which is PayPal and Patreon. For the new folks that have joined Patreon, thank you so much. Welcome aboard. Patreon, you get the episodes before everyone else, getting the credits. And I want to make sure you guys realize, too, there's a coupon against the store in there, too. I might have to repost that coupon because it gets pushed down in the feed. But anyhow, take care of yourself and someone else. Thank you for joining, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.